Welcome to the patio where we parlay. Y'all, so welcome to Patio Parle rebooted. We are back with a mental health episode. This one is called I'm Not Okay, and I decided to do this episode because this is kind of a trending topic that's becoming popular right now, and which I'm glad for. Honestly, there was a point in time where talking about mental health was taboo, like we just wouldn't do it. And that we were just talking about this a little while ago before we started, that there are generations who did not do it at all. So we'll get into that in a minute. But before we get started, I want you all to introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, give us your titles, and then we'll jump right into I'm Not Okay. So Shante Jones is one of our first guests.
Hi, Shante Jones, counselor, LPC-A.
Okay.
Rachel Nanney, therapist, LPC-S.
And I'm Jason Jackson, and I'm just a kind of a trauma survivor that's not okay.
Oh, I love that. I don't love it, but Jason Jackson he's my cousin, first of all, but he was willing to talk because Jason has not sought therapy, but he is willing to seek therapy. And I think because he is a trauma survivor, he knows the importance of it at this point. And well, speaking of trauma, let's just start there with how early can trauma start that you know that you're going to need therapy, or how early can that start for anyone?
Trauma actually starts or could start in utero. What your mother or father, depending on their activities, depending on what they did, you receive those. For example, if a mother drinks alcohol while she's pregnant, she can, pass on certain traits or certain symptoms of her alcohol to her unborn baby. So I don't think there's a specific age that trauma starts, but it starts early.
Starts early. And being aware of that, well, did you have any input, Rachel?
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing, is that it can start in utero. It can be something as simple as she mentioned, like the mother drinking, or the mother experiencing high stress levels on an ongoing basis, or if she's in an abusive relationship. That can then, it's kind of crazy how impactful it can be, but it can inform and impact the child once they're out of her uterus and they've been born in the world, and their relationship patterns and how they respond and are triggered by trauma, or the fight or flight response or fawn response, how they react to stressful situations, especially now that they've found that, at later stages during the pregnancy, the child can hear things outside in the environment as well and be impacted by, what's going on internally with the mother. And It can also be impacted if she's in, a situation with, low income or no finances or no, support, emotional support.
Right. So is that something that's easily recognizable? Or let's just say a mother does have a child that is acting up at 6 months, a year, 2 years. When do you recognize that, okay, this is from...
I think the science community recognizes it as a fact, but I don't think it's been applied to children. I don't think it's thought of by professionals as like, okay, what happened during pregnancy? What happened during birth?
Right.
Could this have an impact on how this child is behaving or the struggles they go through? I don't think it's until later in our lives, and I think this could be applicable to any trauma we go through. We typically go through the trauma and aren't fully aware, cognizant of it, and we're not able to process it until we're out of that and into a safe space.
Right. Is it fair to say we've all experienced trauma?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. I wanted to go on and get that out there because I really do think that some people are kind of like, well, trauma, what kind of trauma did you experience? But I think we've all experienced trauma, right?
Whether of some sort.
Right, of some sort, whether it's extreme or just...
Well, because and like you said, extreme or not. So there's big T and little t. So there's big trauma and little trauma. And for a long time, even, myself and my career, it's easy to negate the little traumas and only think of, okay, well, if I witnessed, a mass shooting, or if, I had a loss of a loved one, then we would think, okay, well, that qualifies as trauma. You're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to, feel the grief process or whatever you need to, or it's justified that you have PTSD. But oftentimes the little traumas, like, maybe abuse in the home, or, a negative experience in your teen years, with friends or social circle or something, those are often minimized. And so people go through their life not addressing those little T traumas, and they will often repeat in different ways until they're addressed.
Good stuff. That is good stuff. So if you all don't mind, do you mind sharing some of your experiences, and I'm not asking you to necessarily share trauma, but what led you into therapy? Because I've often heard that therapists have experienced trauma, which is what leads them to therapy. Anybody care to share? Or?
You can go first if you'd like. I'll share, but I talked last, though.
Well, to answer your question, I don't think it was a trauma that necessarily took me down this route, but more so focusing on families and having, a mom who was a single mother and a dad who lived in another home who was always there. I wanted to understand family and the relationships and the interactions among families. So as I was doing my graduate studies, I said, oh, okay, well, now this makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was a driving force for me to understand how families come together, how families break up, what happens after the family is no longer one unit, or it may become divided. And along the way, I began to understand, okay, well, this is what anxiety looks like. This is what depression looks like. This is what trauma feels like. So what's next? And that's why I decided to go the route that I went.
Okay.
Rachel? Yeah, I definitely think the family component was present for me too. I had a family that was intact growing up, still is, but I was kind of felt like what they called the identified patient, or the black sheep, in terms of I was always more emotionally expressive or wanted to dive into that, and my family was not as receptive to that. So I was kind of the person who, in my friend group growing up, that was kind of like dubbed like the little therapist. So I kind of went into it knowing that it was something I, had a natural inclination towards, but didn't have the education piece. So for me, it was more of a humbling experience when I went to the master's program to realize how much I didn't know, and how much work I needed to do on myself first, in therapy as a client, in order to be able to get to the place where, okay, I can connect and help people heal in the way that I've healed myself.
I like that. Okay. Let's shift real quick then into, and this is not an interview, guys. If you want to just jump in and say anything you want to, that's exactly what it is, a conversation. But I do want to talk about the stigma surrounding mental health. There has always been a stigma. We've been talking before we started the podcast, but we've been talking about generations that didn't, believe in mental health or receiving therapy. But what is the stigma associated with therapy and mental health?
You're crazy.
And how do we, right now, like we said, there's a shift. People are really moving towards it, and I love the positive, like everybody is really supporting it. What do you think is pushing that shift?
Well, I think collectively as a society, we've all been undergoing trauma for the past 2 years. And so people who are already on a breaking point or already struggling in life, a lot of them got pushed to that edge of saying, I can't ignore this anymore, I need help. Yeah.
So COVID and quarantine, you think had a lot to do with it?
And the social movements and, you know, the great resignation, people feeling like their jobs aren't meaningful or satisfying, or they're disrespected by companies, not appreciated. I think that's had a lot to do with it too, and cultural shifts.
I think personally I can say that when COVID started, I'm an introvert, so I'm fine being by myself a lot. Shante, she's an extrovert. She is always with
You're trapped
somebody.
Inside, like,
yeah.
Let me out. Let me talk to people.
Yeah, I know it was hard for extroverts, but to be honest with you, it was easy for me at first. It was fine, and then by year 2, it wasn't that I needed to necessarily. I felt that I needed to be around people, but I think I was feeling like, I felt like I was going crazy in the house by myself. You know what I mean? Like I'm only not having conversations with myself, but like I'm only here
With your thoughts.
with my thoughts. And that, it took almost a whole year for me to realize that is a terrible place to be.
Yeah, I think it could go both ways though. I think people being alone with their thoughts and having to face themselves during that time brought a lot of people to therapy though too.
And I think that,
in addition to making some of them go crazy, like I can't.
Well, I mean, I think
I'm
that
so
it did,
isolated and alone. And,
it brought me to that point where I felt like I did want to talk to someone else. You know what I mean? Like I knew at that point, all of these things that I've had to do the self-reflection on, and all of these things that I'm realizing about myself, now I need to talk to somebody else.
Yeah.
So I think it was, even though COVID and being quarantined was a terrible experience, it did bring out some good for people. So Jason, we haven't heard from you much, but I know you have not sought therapy yet, right?
Well, I intended on going to therapy, and it was early on. Everybody was saying, yeah, you need to go to therapy, and my mom was a counselor and everything, and I understand that it's necessary for a lot of people. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. A lot of it was just I just didn't want to get out of my routine of what I was doing.
I think that's a lot of men.
Yeah, I mean, I got stuff to do. So I just didn't really want to set the time aside to go and do that. And and I know it'll be a painful experience. And I don't want to. I just don't want to have to go through that.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, my experience is just, I mean, what are they really gonna say? What can they really do?
Wow. That's what brought this conversation on. Is a lot of people have been like, well, what can a therapist offer me that a friend can't? Or I can talk to my mom or best friend about it.
Well,
but there's obviously something more that can be.
Well, I mean, I just don't. I know there's value. I know there's a lot of value in it. And I know a lot of people really need it. And but in some situations, you just can't. You can't take away my experience. What I went through is there's nothing that can be accomplished. Even the tiniest increment of improvement to, your daily life or what have you. I don't know if it's enough to break my routine and go and do it.
Do you care to share your experience, or?
Well, yeah, basically I went with my dad down to Galveston, for a weekend, and we had, long story short, we got caught in a riptide. It pulled us both out. It pulled, as we were out there, it actually circled me around and pushed me back in, but it pulled him out, and that was it,
And you haven't talked to anyone since, or you just feel like nobody can help you with that situation?
I don't think they have anything. I don't think they have the words. I don't think there's a technique out there that would be. I just don't think that there's anything that could be done.
That could help the pain.
Yeah.
Can I share with you a little bit of my story? I experienced trauma. Let's just leave it as, trauma. And my coping skill, which I'm great at, is moving on to the next.
Yeah.
I can have a bad day on Monday. Tuesday, I'm good. So I'll move on to the next. Wednesday, move on to the next. All this time, and it's not a lot of time, but time has set in and I'm on to the next. So what do? I go clock in at work. I get a new work routine where I'm at work all of the time.
Yeah.
I'm just coping. Really just, I wouldn't even say I'm on autopilot, but just going through the motions. And I had a situation not too long, this week actually, and I realized I'm not okay. I moved on to the next. And me moving on to the next just compounded. Compounded. And I'm aware. I know strategies. I know people who I can talk to. I have a great support system. But I kept moving on because I did not want to feel what I did not want to feel again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there may not be a quote unquote technique that you think will be able to help. It's not going to change what I experience, what you experience, but for me, it's an opportunity to clear my plate, free up some of that space in my mind, and not just move on to the next. So it's for me, it's like, okay, if I'm bleeding, my hand is hanging off, do I just go to the restroom and put a towel around it, or do I seek a professional who specializes in hands falling off?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
So, what we do is we self-medicate, some drink, some work,
Which is all an avoidance technique.
which is avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I had to realize you're not as okay, Shante, as you thought you were. Just because I'm moving on to the next, for me, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Dry my tears. Let me go clock in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes it's easy for us to think if we're functioning, if we can wake up every day, if we can go to work, if we can call our family, like, we think that means we're okay. And oftentimes that could be the case, but oftentimes the other side of it is we could be repressing what we feel, which is going to come up at some point, like you mentioned. And I think that's the fear, is that, I have a lot of people who come in and say exactly what you said. Like, I don't want to face it. I'm afraid to bring it up because I don't know what'll come up. It's like they're afraid of, if I allow one thing out and speak it into existence that makes it true, the pain you experienced. And then the fear is, well, what's going to come up next? And can I handle that?
Yeah.
Because it's scary to be vulnerable about, painful, traumatic experiences.
Yeah. And it definitely, it's scary, and it's you just don't want to feel any more pain about it,
Yeah.
But, the idea that somebody would, that it would ever be remotely okay, to me is, I'm just like, no, the idea of getting, like you're saying, that you weren't okay. Like, well, yeah, you're not going to be okay.
Right.
That's what it is.
So,
some people...
What do you think? You're saying that basically it just is what it is, and the way you feel is the way you have to feel from now on, or?
Yeah. I think you're not gonna... I think that some people, life's just not fair. Some people experience some really bad things in their life. And those people are just not okay until the end of their life, Really? And they just not. And I know that there are people out there that have experienced things that, yeah, they'll go through counseling. They'll feel better. Again, they'll project that they're better, but they're not okay. And they never will be. And they know that, okay, well, maybe I need some counseling to not be, some people would be, suicidal or, homicidal, just all kinds of, crazy things, Whereas, if you're reasonable, deal with it, it's messed up, it's a bad deal. But you know that you have things that you got to do, and, you're just not going to be okay. There's nothing that can be done. I know you say your situation, you feel like, oh, I was okay today. Well, You weren't, you know. You're not, I mean, if it's bad enough, you're never going to be okay again.
So you feel like you just have to kind of accept what happened and live with the pain, and that's where you feel comfortable being?
I mean, you know, I can't see how life wouldn't be kind of like a torture. You know, I don't see anything that you can do to stop that. You know, but I got a kid, so I gotta try to do what I can to make him see me the way I saw my dad, you know.
You don't want to pass that on, that pain on to him.
Well, I
Does
mean,
he run the risk of doing that if he doesn't heal?
My personal and professional belief, and this is not to minimize your stance or where you're coming from at all, but I think the best gift we can give our children is healing ourselves and healing the generational trauma we've been through. You know, breaking patterns from parents, you know, doing things that were not okay. You know, our ancestors, creating a new way of living that is open to emotional conversations. It's open to healing pain, so that they then can know and see by our example, like, it's okay not to be okay, to pull it back to what your topic is for today. And it's okay to seek help if you want to, because there is a choice in that, and you do have freedom in seeking help if and when you're ready.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I do feel like my son was somewhat traumatized. He was one,
Yeah.
you know, but we both, myself and my wife, lost our dads at the same, basically within a couple
2 or 3
months of each
months.
other. And, you know, I have a great support system, you know. I mean, if I didn't have the support system I had, you know, we wouldn't. I mean, like extended family, we got through it, whereas her situation was, you know, well, I don't want to talk about her situation, but, you know, it was traumatic to where my son's parents changed overnight to somebody different.
Yeah.
And, I mean...
How could you not, though?
Yeah, how could you not?
So how is that going to affect him, do you think, though? Like, he definitely
changed. He
Right.
changed. Well, you know, I mean, he's different. You know, I think he's traumatized. You know, the mom pointed it out. You know, it's like there's a possibility that he's traumatized because he's a rambunctious kid. You know, he's got a lot of energy. And, you know, sometimes it may be a tad bit misguided, you know. And so he might just be a 2-year-old. Who knows? But...
You made a point. Well, you made a comment that I really want to point out when you said, you know, life isn't fair. Things happen to people, and that's just what it is. I think part of my process was acknowledging that, yes, things could be worse. People experience things, you know, on a larger scale than what I experienced. But that does not take away from my experience. So I had to come to a point that, okay, I have my life, I have my health, my living is pretty stable, and there are people who are in a far worse boat. But for me, this was life-changing for me, and not to compare it to anyone else who may be in a different or more intense situation. So, you know, I have students who don't know how to handle a breakup. My boyfriend broke up with me in 6th period. To me, girl, go to class. You're fine. You know, they always come back. Just another topic. But, you know, go to class, you'll be fine. As a 40-year-old, I know that. But as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, she might not know that. So that's something heavy for her. You know, whereas there may be, a woman whose husband just died. Somebody could say, well, girl, he's fine, he's living, go, but that's her experience. Not to compare it to a more intense experience, I think we need to, or I had to understand that it's okay that your situation looks different from this situation, and it's okay to acknowledge your situation as heavy for you.
Yeah,
If that
validate
makes
your
sense.
own experience. Well, because
Yeah.
two people can experience the exact same trauma and respond to it differently.
True.
Yeah.
And so giving ourselves that freedom and that leeway to say, like, this is not okay for me.
For me.
This affected me in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
So Jason, you kind of kept saying that what can be done, and I think that that's kind of the common theme in the African American community. It's always been the common theme in the African American community. So why do you think that seeking therapy in our community has been such a task, or why is that something that we don't do as often as others?
Well, I think for one, we're taught at a young age what goes on in this house stays in this house. So regardless, we did not take whatever happened outside of our home, our family. So I think that's embedded, so to speak, in how, or socialized, not embedded. That's part of how we were raised. And, the house next door could have absolutely no furniture. You wouldn't know it because they're not going to say, I don't have furniture in my house.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just how we have been socialized.
So how do we start changing the conversation and changing that for us so that it is something that we see as a value and as important in our community and within our culture?
I think representation is huge.
Yeah.
What you're doing, by the way.
Is it?
Both of
Make
y'all.
this conversation.
By being in this field and
Yeah, yeah.
by you creating this conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Making it okay. And one thing, because I work with children, I'm glad to see that there are a lot of parents that are now seeking therapy for their children. So if it's normalized at this generation, then the next generation, their children will have seen what it's like to, okay, I experienced this, I need to talk to someone, this is what's going on, I'm not okay, how can I become okay?
So even if the parents don't come, the kids who are now in therapy are saying, there's room and space for this. My
Absolutely.
parents okayed it enough for me to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Jason, do you see it as something you might do in the near future?
Yeah, I would give it a shot. I really would. Give me some. I have to have the time in my day.
See how you're going back to the work that keeps you busy. And Jason is,
The
by the way,
avoiding.
he's the owner of Berkshire Farms. It's a
It's a
Oh,
ranch.
wow.
It's a
So,
ranch, so, yeah.
you have to feed your livestock. You can't just not feed them. If they run out of food or water, or if they're not taking care of.
From what I hear, that's a hard profession. It's like sun up, sun down kind of thing. Yeah.
It's so you just
some bacon.
Did
you bring some bacon?
in there?
I don't have any bacon, but he has good bacon.
We got some summer sauce.
His brother has a winery,
So let me ask you this. What do you think takes place in therapy?
Good
I
question.
think they probably help you process what happened. Help you put it in the right, category in your mind. And they probably, I don't know, I've never been to therapy, but I assume they just try to make you understand the things that they make you look at it rationally as far as what you're dealing with. And I do feel like I'm a rational person as far as, you know,
Yeah.
I understand everything, you know, everything that you could say to me about it. I mean, somebody has said, you know, I've
Well,
got
I think that's the thing you said, I don't know. And I
Well,
think
yeah.
that's for a lot of people, like, and for all of us who've never been or went for the first time, you don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah,
you show
it's true.
up and it's
It's
scary, right? And I
Yeah.
think there's this idea of, I have to bare my soul to this stranger, and who are they, and
Yeah.
can they understand me? Do they understand where I come from? Do they understand my culture? Do they understand my trauma? Will they be respectful of my needs
They-
and where I come from? And that's really scary to take that
It is.
initial step.
Yeah.
It's the vulnerability, like you said, because I think the first time for me it was like, well, what do I want to share and what don't I
Yeah.
want to share? But you kind of have to be willing to
You have
share.
to show up to the table and bring what you need to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have to really, it would have to be somebody that understood that type of trauma. I mean, it would have to be somebody military, something, you know, something where it's really, really, I mean, the idea of comparing it to, you know, everyday life, you know, things didn't go my way, would almost be borderline offensive, you know. And so I wouldn't,
You want someone who can respect what you've been through and honor that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, you know, I wouldn't, it's got to be somebody that's dealt with personally themselves some pretty heavy trauma.
You know,
Permanent.
the good thing about that is you get to choose.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean,
You know,
but,
you-
would they put that on there, you know?
Therapists don't promote their personal life, but
Yeah.
they can promote what their professional experience is. And
Yeah.
you also have, like, you can advocate for yourself and you get to choose. You can say, you know, I want a 15-minute phone consultation
Yeah.
before I meet you.
Yeah.
You can choose what price range you're okay with. You
Yeah.
can look in their credentials as well. And you also, a lot of people feel like, well, if I sign up and if I go to this effort, I have to stick with them. If you're not vibing and they're not giving you what you need, you're paying for a service.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal service,
Yeah.
you know, and intimate, but you get to choose what works for you.
Yeah,
You get to choose.
yeah, I'm with it.
So are you open? Still sounds kind of like
Oh,
you're like,
yeah, I'm with it. I'm with it. I've been with it since, I mean, I was always with it. I never was anti, you know, I was just, you know, I guess the
Well, it sounds
thing
like
in
the
the
time
black
was-
community, it was
Yeah.
just, you know,
Yeah.
hey, if I can make it, I can make it. If not, I'll just put it off. And I've just been putting it off, looks like. You know, I feel like I've just been putting it off. Man,
Well, and from an outside perspective, not being a part of the black community, I see it's a very strength-based community, which I love. But I think there's a flip side to that because it's like we're strong, we deal with our problems, we're community-oriented. So it's like the positives of, you know, you have that strength-based community sense. But then on the flip side, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think some people can see that as therapy is weak or we don't share our problems, like you said earlier.
So I'm going to get touchy real quick with what you just said. Then.
Yeah.
So where do you think that sense of strength comes from within our community? Why are we so protective and so...
I don't know if I could guess, but I wouldn't know
Right.
because
What
I'm
do
not
you-
a part of it. My guess would be just the adversities that y'all have faced
And
and that you have to kind of
Yeah.
band together to find that strength in
I
your
would agree.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Two more things real quick. I wanted to touch on, I know Jason, you kept talking about you have a son. So Daniel, how do you think you're going to handle this moving forward for him, since you said it's already affected him?
well, I think I have to, you know, get myself back to a closer version of who I was, you know. And, you know, people that go through these kind of things end up being a shell of themselves, you know. And I mean, who was I really? I mean, you know, but you know, you're not who you were. And things like, you know, I say, well, I'm just never. I was fishing at the time, you know. So I said I would never fish again, you know, and I haven't since, you know. But the idea that I would, and I thought about this about, you know, 2 months ago. The idea that I wouldn't take my son fishing, you know. I mean, that's just something that I just can't.
Right.
I have to see things like that and be like, no, I'm not. I'm gonna definitely take my son fishing,
Yeah.
you know. And you know, I have to get past some of my personal hang-ups that I just have to, I have to work through some things that, that are going to be really tough to work through. And that's where I say, yeah, I'm with the whole counseling thing. It's not like I'm against
I was gonna say, I have a
it.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Therapy,
It's not that I'm not against therapy. I just...
Well, you keep saying time. I don't have the time. So I
Well,
would just like to challenge you to say you'll
also
never
the
have the time.
Well, yeah,
Unless
yeah.
you make it, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. And I also, I do stand behind my... What can they really say?
So, yeah, there's where
what
I'm
can
like-
they really say? What can they say to me that would make it?
You gotta
It just
try
wouldn't
and
be.
see.
Yeah.
But
I'm
you know
with it.
what? And I think this is would it be a misnomer or a misconception? You think you go to therapy and the therapist tells you you need to do this, you need to do that, and your life is cured.
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's so not the case.
Of course not.
That's not the case.
Great if it were that simple.
I know.
right?
If, sign me up.
I wanted that. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily what the therapist will say to you, but more so what you say to the therapist.
Yeah.
Because what I heard you say is, I don't want to go fishing again. But I can't see myself not taking my son fishing. So here you have conflicting feelings and ideas.
Yeah.
Right? So with acknowledging that there's a struggle going on, and sometimes just you saying it, and you said it to yourself, but
You worked through it on your own
You
just
worked
by
through it
us
on your
providing
own.
a space for you to do that.
that's it, that's all. And I know it must be really uncomfortable. I'm not saying, hey, go sign up. You got availability. But that's something that I had to, realize.
Yeah.
There's some things that everyone here knows that you will never say out loud
Right.
for whatever reason. And sometimes it's a huge release just saying, whew, okay. Whatever that something is, so it's more so what you can
Yeah.
say. Because if there was a
I like
magic
that.
pill, I'll pass them out. But
Yeah,
it's not that easy. And I said, I actually said this years ago before, anything of this magnitude happened. I said, I'm gonna drive down the street and I'm gonna see a dead squirrel, and that's gonna be the cherry on top, and I'm just gonna, I don't want that to happen, because what you suppress is going to come out.
Yeah.
But you can control it through therapy, as opposed
safer setting.
in a safe space with someone who you've built rapport with, someone that you trust, in a therapeutic environment. Whereas, you driving down the street in your car, listening to, whatever you listen to, and you see roadkill, and that's what I said, for me. I said, I just hope I don't see a little rabbit and it just be the last straw that causes me to just have an emotional break.
Yeah.
So to avoid that, then let me go talk to this person, or let me, try to process these things, because it shows up in your behavior.
Yeah.
It shows up in your interactions with other people. It shows up. Period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That definitely. It definitely shows up. That's for sure. Yeah.
And not always in convenient ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it changes you. It shows up. I don't have the patience that I used to have. I, get angrier, But I don't know if it's I don't have the patience for things that I shouldn't have patience for in the first place. Or, angry at people that, they needed, I don't know. So, yeah. It definitely changes your interactions with people.
It changes your interactions.
Yeah, I know. That's for sure.
Well, and maybe it's not so much about you getting back to who you were, but creating who you're going to be now.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone should tweet that.
For real.
Yeah.
And you get to create that, which is so cool. Like, it's not cool what you went through. Horrible, horrific.
Yeah.
Probably would not want to have that. But
Yeah,
you get to create who you want to be for yourself and for your family now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm more of a. I look at it like I'm just here now to make sure I teach my son everything I know.
That's
You
your
know.
purpose.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm with you. Yeah. But sometimes you go through some things where you're like, yeah, it's just not really a whole lot you can do. You're just here. You're just here.
We're going to change that. In our community, we're going to change that. Because it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be.
It could be more than
Right.
just existence.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And
So-
I think some people, I hate to,
No,
but some people like, we were talking earlier before about Regina King's son.
yeah.
Some people are in so much agony. And I know this is not a popular,
Right.
perspective or whatever. But some people are in so much agony that I don't think, you kind of, if you could look at it like, well, they're not hurting anymore.
Oh, Jason. Can't.
I'm just,
So
people are hurt.
sometimes you view
Some
like
people-
suicide as a relief for some people.
Now, yeah, I do. I think. I mean, I'm not suicidal personally, but I just feel like, I mean, everybody's like, yeah, you can. This will help you. You'll feel better. But some people are hurt, in a way that you just can't.
You think there's no
You
way
just
to...
can't. Yeah,
hard
there's
to
no
see
way
hope
to get
sometimes.
through that. I mean, it's just things are bad. For a lot of people. I mean, almost 1 million people died from COVID. There's a million families that are devastated. I mean, and that's just in America. But I think there are so many people that are hurting so bad. I feel like, counseling them and, therapy is going to help a lot of them, but some of them have been through so much or such a difficult experience that it's just, I mean, you would be better off spending your time dealing with some of the people that have mediocre, not mediocre, because I know you're saying that everybody's situation is
Unique
important
to them.
yeah. But your time would be better spent with somebody that could be helped, more.
So you feel like some people are just too lost.
Some people are gone.
Why
Some
do you
people are
think
just
that?
gone. Some people's experiences have taken them to where they're still there. They still exist. They'll live the rest of their lives and be
And you think there's nothing
Semi-productive.
earthly possible that could help them change their perspective about their experience? Or change their feelings?
I think you can make it to where they're not a danger to themselves or a danger to others, or they're semi-productive, but the idea that they would be ever close to okay, I just don't see that. I mean, and this is a small sliver of the population, but I just don't see that you can make some people's experiences to where they would be okay with life. I just don't. I just don't see it. I mean, but I would love to.
I think suicide, and we even shy away from saying the word suicide, which is okay to speak out loud. But suicide is a temporary solution, a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry. Keep talking. keep it going.
unfortunately, people do get to the point where they feel there is absolutely no way that this can get better. There's no way I can continue, and suicide for them at that moment is the best option, right? Who lives to say, "Oh man, I made a mistake"?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Some people do with their
Well,
suicide.
yeah,
if
yeah,
they
you're
don't
absolutely
complete their suicide, yeah.
You are absolutely right.
Some
But
people are able to say,
some
Yeah.
people are able to say, I made a mistake. But for those who die by suicide,
There's no second chance.
There's no second chance. So now you have a problem. on top of another problem, and now that family is affected. So that's how we have these generational curses. That's how the story continues in that direction. And my heart goes out to Regina King and all of the families who have experienced suicide to that nature. But at the same time, suicide is it's more common, or more, people are more open now. I have a lot of students who, my boyfriend broke up with me, I want to kill myself. That's a temporary problem. Suicide, and what if, that person kills themselves, and now they, well, not kill, attempts to kill themselves, and now they're paralyzed from the neck down. And so
that's worse, right?
So now, okay, that
right.
problem seems more, or
right.
less
minute.
intense. It's more minute, because now, there's another problem. So, it's temporary. The issue, because you could wake up tomorrow and feel like a brand new person.
I don't think we're here to suffer. You know what I mean? I don't really think that anybody is here to just suffer for the rest of their lives. So I think that's why we have options like therapy. And it just got real heavy at the end, y'all. I hate that it got heavy at the end, and definitely want to pay my respects to Regina King and the family, because it's a tragic, sad situation. Just to kind of wrap it up, though, for people that are on the fence about therapy, or still might feel the same way that Jason does about, well, what can they do? What can really be done? What are some healthy options, like meditation or whatever, that people can do to keep themselves going?
Well, I think what we're kind of touching on, the heavy topic, is the surviving versus thriving. And so what you're touching on is people are just getting up day to day, hoping that they survive. We're more talking about, how do we get to the place of thriving, and what tools can we use to do that? And an analogy I use with some people that I see is, like, sometimes people are just in a space where they need to know that the light at the end of the tunnel is not another train that's going to come hit them, and that they're going to get through it. And so sometimes therapy can be just that space to honor the depths of despair that somebody's in, and let them know they're not alone in it, and that it can get better, if perspectives can shift and if the work can be put into it. So I think meditation's great. I think mindfulness practice, which is kind of a form of meditation, grounding skills is a part of that. All of these terms are things people can look up, by the way. I think a lot of what I'm researching and finding nowadays is just body movement, and how much the mind-body connection, just how prominent it is. So a lot of our traumas we actually store in our body. It's physical tension, pain, illness, autoimmune disorders. And so I think a lot of what we need to do just in our society is integrate, the medical, nutritional, body movement, like exercise, yoga, stretching, and the mental health component all as one, like looking at our perspective, our bodies holistically, and seeing how we can kind of tap into different areas to, make our day more enjoyable, and less of the surviving, more of the thriving.
I like that. That's good.
What about you?
I concur.
You concur. That's it. Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap it up there. I appreciate everyone for their participation, our professionals, Shante, Rachel, thank you so much for your input.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us all.
Joining us. Hopefully you guys will join us again for Patio Parle. We have a few new episodes coming up, but please check this one out. Listen to everything they had to say. Take it in, digest it, and share it with your friends, because this is a very, very important episode. So with that, we'll see you next time.
If you or anyone you know is struggling with mental health or thoughts of suicide, please call the Suicide Prevention Hotline.